Hey everyone, welcome to Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast. This podcast is all about farmers markets, how to increase your market business success while providing people with fresh food. Farmers markets are essential. Whether you're a farmers market manager or a small farmer or food maker selling at farmers markets, you have found just the right podcast. This week we're chatting with Jon Przybyl and Amanda Abou-Eid, owners and operators of Proof Bread, a rising bakery selling at 5 farmers markets in Arizona. Hey everyone, I'm one of your hosts, Bridget Myers. I'm a longtime farmers market manager, Vendor 101 co-teacher, and education coordinator at Farmers Market Pros.
And I'm Kat Fields-White, Director of San Diego Markets, still an active farmers market manager, founder of Farmers Market Pros, and host of Intense, the Farmers Market Conference, and the Farmers Market Pros community.
And I'm Justine Marzoni-Mead, Tent Talk producer, marketing director for Farmers Market Pros, and logistics coordinator for Intense, the Farmers Market Conference.
Today's episode of Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast, is supported by the Food Corridor, streamlining rental kitchen operations to make things easier for kitchen managers and food entrepreneurs throughout the U.S. Find more information at foodincubationsummit.com or by clicking the Food Corridor logo on the resource page at farmersmarketpros.com.
The Farmers Market Pros duo is taking a few weeks to reorganize, produce a new season of great episodes for you, and do a little travel for work and pleasure. Today, we're bringing you a Best of Tent Talk episode that originally aired in 2021. On this week's episode, you'll hear from Jon and Amanda, owners of Proof Bread. They sell at multiple farmers markets in Arizona, and we just love their story about starting and expanding their business. Enjoy. Welcome back to Tent Talk, everybody. Today we are talking with Jon Przybyl and Amanda Abou-Eid, owners and bakers at Proof Bread in the Phoenix, Arizona metro area. After 4 years of baking in their garage, they currently sell at 5 weekly farmers markets across Arizona and just built and launched a commercial bakery space. Sounds straightforward enough, right? Well, just listen. I think they have a good story for us. So thank you so much, Jon and Amanda, for joining us on Tent Talk. We're really excited to speak with you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
We're happy to be here.
Yeah. Little shout out. I like to talk to Arizona people because Kat and I are from Arizona and just feels
nice.
like a little home. So we have a little familiarity with your markets that you're in. But if you want to just kind of tell us your background, tell us a little bit about your personal and business background and like how you got started in the food industry that led up to Proof Bread.
Well, we were both doing other things prior to our time with Proof, but the one thing that we did have was a weekly attendance to one of the farmers markets, the Gilbert Farmers Market. So we came from both like a version of desk jobs, and we're going to the Gilbert Farmers Market every week on Saturdays. We were buying Proof Bread at that time, beginning in 2016, and that was the only Saturday market you could find Proof Bread at, the Gilbert Market. It was a single baker named Jared Allen, and you'd often find him or the one person that sold for him pretty regularly at the market. And so we went every Saturday for our Proof Bread. Meanwhile, I was running a complete different style of business, something that I had just kind of fallen into and dreaming about doing something kind of at the local level. And I'll let Amanda tell her own background.
Sure. So my interest in food, I think, began as a kid. I had a pretty unique experience in that I was, my parents owned a farmer's market stand in a regular market in York, Pennsylvania.
Ooh,
So
wow.
I grew up in the farmer's markets per se and around food always. And, when my family, we spent most of our time in the kitchen. And I was, I didn't grow up appreciating that until I was much older. So when Jon came to me and said, hey, want to buy a bakery? It was kind of a gut instinct to just say, sure, let's do it, And surprisingly, we have my family was like right behind us. It was so funny considering, the toils and troubles I watched them go through. They were still pretty supportive of us going down this path.
In both cases, we have families with kind of a background around food, tradition centered around food. I think it's one of the things that we appreciate about each other, before Proof.
Yeah, Jon cooked for me on our third date.
Ooh,
Came over with
romantic.
a box of appliances and ingredients. I cooked.
Very
I like
good.
it.
Anyway, yeah. So that's kind of where we found ourselves right before Proof came into our lives.
Well, that makes a little more sense actually to me, because I saw that you went straight from, both of you seem to be in kind of heavy duty business, industry, data management kind of things, and then all of a sudden this. So we tried to avoid asking like, what were you thinking? But this makes more sense that you had some food industry stuff in your background.
Well, it's so funny because I like studied business and had like a existential life crisis on my last semester, and I had a mentor that was like, just finish and go do something that is business is great because you can go anywhere with that. And I worked for an airline for some time, but even starting in the corporate world or whatever, I still knew like I wasn't going to be here forever.
I did a number of things leading up to Proof, and in all of them got some sort of forward progress, some better than others. If you take kind of a decade into consideration, but none of it really felt
John's
right.
had businesses since he was like 16 years old.
and all of them, like in some way, shape, or form, served me at the time that I was, working on them, or served the community that I was working with. And yet, in all cases, I was still looking for something a little bit more close to the source. First, I had this gut feeling that was just the right thing to do in that time. We showed up to a farmer's market on a Saturday in June of 2017, and we had just had kind of a somewhat difficult trip to Poland to visit my parents. They were not feeling well at the time, and so we're sort of facing that situation and wanted to come home to some comfort, and Proof Bread was it on Saturday. The next day, we go up to the market, and all of a sudden we learn that Jared, the original owner of Proof Bread, is moving in a few weeks, and it's quite uncertain what's going to happen to the bakery. At the time, it's a garage, it's a man, it's some bowls, some really old, mostly broken down restaurant equipment that you have to work with on a daily basis to even know how to operate, because the thermostat is broken on both of the decks of the oven. The rack oven is held together by loosely connected wires that sometimes disconnect, sometimes spark. The dough is all hand mixed. The refrigerator that's meant to cool the dough is not loaded with any Freon, so it holds maybe 60 degrees when it's 120 outside. Basically, all the aspects that you would normally need to control a bakery are not present.
I can see how this was irresistible to buy this business.
Yeah, you're really good at selling it. You're selling it to it.
But I'm telling you about the, I guess, challenge that we walked into, but the reason we did was Proof already had a spark in the community that was also built by that same person who. Proof has always been a thing of kind of sweeping you away. It swept us away the moment we stepped in. I initially thought that it was going to be somewhat easy to manage. I greatly underestimated what it took to manage the bakery. Where it would go.
To be fair, he originally proposed, when I said yes, he was like, it's just going to be 4 to 9 every morning, like no big deal.
And I was like,
Easy.
in that moment, still intending on holding on to my past in some way, like holding on to some of the other things we were working on. But that was the summer slow season for Proof. And by October, that same equipment that I described, which couldn't handle a whole lot, was operating 24 hours a day in order to keep up with the busier markets. And we were trying to apply any kind of business sense that we had to this. Jared sort of admittedly said, I'm not a business guy. He was a chef by trade. So really good at, working in the kitchen, working in a really difficult environment. He's definitely an artist. And he sort of brought that to the foundation of Proof, doing the most difficult form of baking in order to, in some ways, make a statement in the community like, hey, this can still exist. You can come to the market and get this sort of dreamy bread made by this person who worked all night, didn't sleep to bring it to your table just in time. That's what that's the state that we found Proof. And it was a pleasure to be a part of it at that time because
Yeah,
it was,
even in a 120-degree garage with no AC, it was still pretty fun.
Yeah,
So-
I love talking to people that bought businesses who are shoppers because
Yeah.
you really get the magic of like what the farmers market is. And I think sometimes, farmers markets catch serial entrepreneurs. Like I feel like so many people that start a bunch of businesses will end up in the farmers market in some point in their lives. But we talked to Christopher from Benny Blanco, and he kind of had that similar thing where he gets farmers markets because he was a shopper and he's so, in touch with the magic of it and what it really brings to people weekly. So it's great hearing from now business owners that like you get it.
Yeah, you got the shopper side first, which I feel like is such a specific keen eye that if you just start a business, you'll never have that shopper eye first experience because you're starting it from the other side. So it's nice when it works out when you guys were obviously passionate about buying it and then now you can sell it. When Jared was moving, was he looking to sell it? Like, was he saying he wanted to sell it, or did you all approach him and say, hey, are you going to sell it? Would you like to sell it? Or how did that go down with the transition of Proof to you guys?
so you can still go back in the Instagram feed and find the post from June of 2017 where he puts it out there that he would love to sell the bakery and offer somebody some training for a few weeks to transition it. So that was, I believe, Saturday that he put that post out, and I got together with him on Monday.
Whoa. Wow.
So by the time I got together with him, the original owner of Benny Blanco Tortillas, before Chris had bought it,
Yeah.
approached Jared as well.
Oh, wow.
Wow, this
And
is like
he was
the
in the
meeting of
running
universes.
to take over Proof, but his wife said no.
Good for her.
She's like, not only that, but sell that tortilla company. We're out of here.
So that left an opportunity for me because Jared had known Benny from Benny Blanco. They were neighbors at the Gilbert Farmers Market. So, he had a little bit more of the rapport side, but I don't know, Jared also somehow immediately seemed to know that Amanda and I would be a good fit for Proof. He also went on a sort of gut instinct because the whole thing went down very fast.
It really felt like we had stepped on a sled on the top of a hill and just went for it. Like it was just something that was supposed to happen, but it happened like so fast.
And we're still in that downward hill that seems to be accelerating. Most of the time we're just like gripping the sides of the hill once in a while, wondering,
don't fall off. Well, it's kind of like that. I feel like if you think about it too much and you like try to analyze every little number and thinking about the farmers market business, you might like talk yourself out of it. So if you want to go for it,
Yeah.
you just got to go for it and then, figure it out as you go down that hill. You just got to go. Just rip that Band-Aid off. Just get it started. I was going to ask, so Jared was one man making that bread and people knew him and he was the one at the market and it was just one market. So he had kind of a bit of a cult following, like him personally, probably, just because we see that a lot with farmers market businesses where it's like the chef or the business owner in the booth and people come and they want to talk to that person. So how did his customers react when he sold the business to you guys and you were out there and then you kind of started adding businesses or adding markets and it was like employees out there? Was there any feedback from customers about that, or was everyone just happy to get their Proof bread even though Jared left?
this transition in hindsight seems like it was fast, but in person it seemed natural. So July of 2017, Amanda and I are at the Gilbert Farmers Market together every Saturday, and we're making all the bread, ourselves. January of 2018, Amanda is still out at the Gilbert Farmers Market, and I'm at the Phoenix Public Market. We just split forces along the way. We started analyzing the business and realizing that we had more of an ability to learn and make the products that we wanted to make and invest in kind of the baking itself, essentially sort of take over the identity of the bakers of Proof, understand what it really meant to be a baker, really sort of dive all the way in by maximizing our work at the farmers markets. When we first took Proof on, it was about 50% wholesale and, the Gilbert Farmers Market. But wholesale was receiving 90% of the attention because it was a daily bake and daily set of demands. And so within the first 6 months, we flipped that on its head and we went basically 100% market, 0% wholesale. We were completely out of wholesale within the first year. So there was a huge change that happened there, but Proof just became more true to that market identity. And people were appreciative of that because now you could find Proof at a couple places instead of just one. We were reaching the Phoenix market for the first time.
Yeah, and in working the Gilbert market for that first year, honestly, it was kind of a seamless transition. Jared had done a really good job connecting with the community, and I think that Proof had an identity before we even entered that we just kind of expanded upon, and everybody was just really grateful to continue to receive their bread. I mean, I think we have been pretty open and authentic about the journey from the beginning. And so when people can see that, it's easy to connect and empathize with, sleepless nights and all the work that took to get in there.
And I think Jared had such a good personal relationship with his customers. I'm sure there was some element of, well, if Jared thinks these guys are okay, they must be okay.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. There was a
That
lot of
trust.
people that said that in the beginning months. Well, but then Proof went from the one market of customers to several. And so within about a year, the majority of the customers were new ones.
Sure.
They'd only seen you. Yeah.
Yet we were very fortunate that still to this day, there's people that buy from us regularly and say, we've been around since the Jared days. Especially here where we've opened up shop in the Mesa area. We have a lot of those because Jared, the original garage that I started attending to learn how to bake bread was only like a mile from this point right here. So
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, when you bought Proof, he was baking in his garage under cottage food laws. He was selling at farmers markets. So it probably seemed like a reasonable plan to just continue with that. But baking for some wholesale and a single market in a garage and baking for multiple markets in a garage with obviously the need for more employees and things was complicated, right? So how did you upgrade the garage as you expanded? And then maybe tell us a little bit about the story of having to leave the garage.
yeah. At first, most of our decisions were being made under the sort of necessity to make Proof a viable business that would be long lasting. When we came to find it, it was being held together at one man's sacrifice. If you did the math, there's really nothing left for him at the end of the day. In other words, he was working 7 days a week, some days over 24 hours a day. And if you tried to job it out, pay somebody to do that work, there wouldn't be enough revenue to pay somebody to do the work. So the whole thing was being held up by somebody who just was willing to hold it up. And so we realized we needed to make more bread, period. Like one way or the other, the only way to make the business viable was to make more bread. We saw that Phoenix had this very unique opportunity to grow in farmers markets stably, which is not necessarily the case everywhere. Some places are fortunate to have indoor farmers markets year round, but then many places it's just a seasonal affair. And so maybe wholesale is the better way to go. But we sort of took a bet on our own ability to connect with the community as opposed to like relying on big orders from restaurants. And
not only that, just delivering directly to the customer allows for the bakery life to be a little more fun. I mean, you got to get your kicks in where you can,
Yeah.
Right.
such rigid parameters to bake to allowed us a lot more freedom to experiment and grow as bakers as well.
And
Yeah,
learn.
that's a really great point about the difference between like wholesale and farmers market. It's like if a restaurant puts in an order for 50 baguettes, you can't be like, oh, well, I did something new this week.
I want to try this out.
Yeah, but at the farmers market, you can tell your shoppers like, hey, I'm trying something different. This is what I got today. And if they like your bread, they're probably going to want to try what you made.
Yeah, they're going to game for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's where the having had the customer experience first came into play a lot too. Is like, what would I get excited about at the farmers market, right? I'm going to be jazzed about what the baker's jazzed about.
So we kept Proof in its similar set of tools, and we didn't buy anything for Proof other than we did actually very early on.
More duct tape.
Yeah.
Super glue.
Very early on, we discovered restaurant auctions.
Yes. That's the key.
And
That's a good Bourdain clue that he put in Kitchen Confidential.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
like,
Oh, restaurant
yeah,
auctions.
look
oh,
for
yeah.
restaurants that just closed that
I used
bought
to go to
everything
auctions
new.
all the time, and for restaurants that just opened then closed like quickly, that's where you got the best stuff. I feel like
Almost new.
yeah,
almost now. It was sad, but also exciting for me.
yeah. So we got some equipment, and we pretty much picked up anything we could get our hands on that seemed like it would make sense in the bakery. Some devices we had never seen before or knew what they did, but in some cases, like I read about them, and anytime I thought something would be helpful, we gave it a try. So we sort of started accumulating that way, but it wasn't until about a year and 4 months or so that we powered on a mixer for the first time.
Oh,
Wow.
Oh, you're doing all hand mixing the whole
Yeah,
time?
so-
Wow.
So we were baking for 3 farmers markets at one point, hand
wild.
mixing. Our schedule is actually more intense than it is right now for a fraction of, the capability. We couldn't afford one staff member really. Like we were losing money through 2018. Our oven broke down in February and we had no idea what to do because we hadn't thought about, well, what are we going to do when the oven breaks? We're just kind of assuming everything would just continue along in its weird sort of.
Well, no, the weird thing was, it's like we talk about gut feelings a lot because we're pretty in tune with our guts, I guess. We were already starting to kind of shop around for an oven because we were at capacity, and the oven that we were working with was already half broken. And then it just pooped out on us one day.
And we brought in a service company which charged us $1,000 only to tell us that they couldn't do anything for us. They couldn't find parts for this oven.
That's another challenge that I think we weren't expecting is like, who does what? How do we maintain our equipment? Who do we call? Where do we turn? That was really hard without having like a, big baking community at the time.
Or a background in working in the food industry. Oh, this is when you call a tech in, or, oh, there's companies that just do this or that.
Yeah, it was even hard to Google,
Yeah,
Mhm.
for sure.
Yeah.
We actually had a magazine for a while in Phoenix that provided resources to independent bakers, more for small restaurants, because that was so hard to find that information.
Yeah.
You just don't have that network there. It's very tricky.
Yeah.
So you kept the garage moving along. Did you expand the garage as you added equipment?
First we sold the one thing that we actually owned. Amanda owned a condo. We had just barely bought this house that the bakery was in. Actually, we were renting it when we took on the bakery and very quickly started to negotiate to buy it within a few months. And so we secured that, which was great because we were making tons of changes to the capacities in the garage, whatever.
Yeah, something about building a commercial bakery in your rented garage sounds dicey.
That didn't really sit well with us. So we tried to buy the house as quickly as we could. And then we had this condo that we used to live in that we were renting out, and we chose to sell it. It was the one sort of asset that Amanda had accumulated that had some good equity in it. And over the course of 2018, every dollar that we got from that sale got put back into Proof. And we found ourselves kind of in a do or die moment in January of 19. Either the business floats right now on its own, or we're out of resources of our own to put in. And by that point, we had gotten ourselves a dough sheeter. We had paid off a new oven that we had gotten with that. And we built a lot of new processes around the bakery, started to try to win back a little bit of our time so that we could start, I guess, planning a little bit better and taking advantage of what was there in terms of demand, making the right amount of bread, just shoring up everything. And for the most part, we lifted off in January of 2019 successfully. We started to, have a return. And so at that point, neither of us were working jobs. And we then spent 2 winters building additions on the garage, both additions that we could kind of incorporate in some way in the house in the future would the bakery ever move, but additions that we sort of self-built with my dad primarily, and just essentially paying for the smallest amount of labor and materials to do so. We wrote our own plans, filed our own permits, did all of our own work, and this was all in order to keep up with the growing bakery's real estate demands. It was far more cost effective to do that than to do what we just did over the last year, which was, still feels like it was impossible, even though we're on the other end of it now.
You baked a couple days ago, right? So in your new bakery. So what was just fill our listeners in for those who have not watched your YouTubes, and you are very transparent. You tell a great story in social and things, but what was the push that made you have to move out of your fabulously expanded and
hand-built
garage?
Well, so
Why would you leave that?
We were trying to build in such a way that we could be there as long as possible. We were trying to, in many ways, the reason we were building in the first place was to lower our footprint, if that makes sense. Like by expanding our actual physical footprint, we could have better tools, better amounts of space for things, less
clutter on the outside.
Right. Also less need for cars because, just more efficient processes. So we tried to get it down to the point that, there was like 3 cars parked on the street at any given moment. And that's it. Like other than that, it just looks like a house, on a street, like all the other houses. But we had one particular neighbor that all the neighbors for the most part, really love us there and have been supportive the whole time. In fact, always getting bread from us in some way, shape, or form.
What's not to like about having your neighborhood smell like
a
fresh baked bread? Right.
But we had one neighbor that felt otherwise, maybe more, if it was more than certainly like far down the street, but one very close neighbor that felt otherwise. And that person started to call the city regularly to the point that the city could not, they came out and looked at it and kind of saw what was going on and saw that we had good intentions and sort of left us alone for a little while. But then the neighbor kept calling and writing. And, at some point they have to represent both parties. That's their work, I suppose. So they started to request meetings and came to see the bakery. Actually, it was the vice mayor that came out with the head of code compliance, and they liked what we had going on and saw that we had a desire to eventually transition. We talked about it being the middle of a pandemic and there being a lot of uncertainty, but sort of willing to transition in a year and a half or so. This was about a year ago. But then a month passed, and I think the neighbor continued to call in. And so they sort of changed from that to saying, okay, we really need you out by January. They came with a letter. And we just moved out in July. I had kind of a panic moment, last September, because I knew that it was impossible to move the bakery that took almost 3 years to build in just 4 short months. And it was impossible to move it in 4 months, but fortunately we did enough in 4 months to buy ourselves monthly extensions, from the city.
Good. Your intention long term had been to move into a commercial space, right? Just in terms of scale and
Right. We knew it was inevitable. We were just trying to save money so that we could keep proof at the integrity that it currently is. I think that any move that was premature to this one would have required some form of selling out in order, either really cutting the ingredient profile that we use, because we support local wheat, stone milled at our local mill. We pay a lot more for flour. Changing kind of that grassroots model, certainly introducing yeast into our products, which would speed up the whole production cycle by a lot. But we'd have had to compromise in some way to remain viable if we had to move any faster.
Yeah. So the technical issue that meant that the city could make you move was I know typically cottage food laws don't allow more than, say, one employee. Was that the kind of thing that kicked you over?
The cottage food laws weren't the problem in Arizona because they don't really have any kind of discussion on employment.
Arizona.
The cottage food laws are like, compared to California, I've looked at the Arizona food laws, cottage food laws. It's like, wow, you can just do anything you want in your house compared to us.
The cottage food laws are like a one-page document with a bunch of guidelines. And there's a small office that regulates this, and they're not very active in sort of enforcement.
Which is nice, right? It allows a lot of freedom for creative bakers.
Yeah, from a just political standpoint, we would definitely be strong supporters of the weak cottage food laws. I would actually argue that the cottage food laws are more similar to the most traditional cottage food laws that there are. I mean, talking like historically, when people actually made a living from their cottage businesses in parts of the world, and still do in some parts of the world. But the problem came in a zoning ordinance with the city that did not allow for non-resident employees. That was the violation that we had, is they could park legally on the street if they were visitors to the house, but not if they were non-resident employees. And so the burden that the city had was to basically prove that they were non-resident employees, which I made quite easy because we had social media transparency. We weren't really hiding what we were doing, at least on social media.
No, not just that, we tried to be above the books on all things, so that we give our employees the best chance, the best environment that we can give them.
Yeah, we at that point had health benefits that we were offering people working in our garage. We were trying to do things in the best possible way for our whole organization, our community, really. We were trying to build the bakery in a way that it minimized the impact on our neighborhood. We were trying to pay our employees in a way that was fair and real. And we were trying to engage our community in a way that showed a high level of integrity. In reality, that was the right play, because when we did get in trouble, we had plenty of people to turn to for help.
Yeah.
So
that's how you were able to kind of do a GoFundMe and get some support on having to move more quickly and come up with those funds more quickly, right?
Yeah,
there's nothing like keeping your platform alive to get some help when you need it.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of people that really believe in what we're about and how we produce bread and why we produce bread in the first place. A lot of people that had firsthand experience enjoying our products through the pandemic. I think we played an interesting role in a time that people were feeling uncertain about a lot of things. Like, you'd go to Trader Joe's and find the bread shelves empty, but Proof Bread was delivering double the amount of bread we were the week prior. Being small and having local networks of suppliers, getting more flour in March of 2020 was just a text message to the mill saying, hey, we need more. Whereas if you went to the restaurant supply store, they limited you to one bag of flour of any kind, whether you're a bakery or whatever. So we were able to step up in a time that people needed some groundedness. And then 6 months later, when the tides turned sort of against us, I think there was a wave of acute support.
Yeah, those
Yeah.
local supply chains. Hashtag farmers markets are essential, and that goes double for farmers market bakers.
Yeah. Well, transitioning, talking a little bit more about the farmers market, I was looking through your social media, which we'll get to in a little bit, because you guys are so vulnerable and so upfront. And I think that, is probably part of why people love you so much, because it really feels like they know you just by looking at your social. But we'll talk about that in a second. But I was looking at that and kind of scrolling back, and you talked about your stepping away from the Mesa farmers market for a little bit earlier this year, and it looks like you're back now. So we were just wondering if that's related to the zoning issues that you had with the city, or the market move, or a different issue, or is that resolved now that you're back at the Mesa market?
There's some different issues there. The Mesa Farmers Market changed hands in terms of the organizers, and in that it's a really small market. We were struggling for a minute because in April, the construction project here was taking some really negative turns. We found ourselves over budget and behind, and having to make tough decisions like furlough employees.
It was kind of a low point for us personally and professionally, I guess, considering the business. We had a core employee leave, and that was kind of hard on us because, we treat everybody here like family. And that just kind of felt very destabilizing on top of an already unstable time. And so the market made some decisions that we found to be kind of questionable at the time, but we like I said, we were in an unstable time. So there was no rationalizing things in our minds at the moment, so we were kind of being brats, to be honest.
Yeah, we felt a little bit upset. Well, I felt quite upset about a decision they had made that I felt, wasn't, I guess it just wasn't, it's a decision I would have made.
More about placement or fees, or this is a farmer's market, very specific audience. So
about competition.
Oh, gotcha.
So it was a really small market, and they agreed to bring in a very large bakery competitor when it was our smallest market by a lot. And we had been there to found it. And so them coming in changed the math quite a bit for what
it was also kind of against what they had originally stated their policy to be. So, for us, we're building this thing on some founding principles, and we don't find those to be transitory or really changeable at all. That's who we are at our core, and to have something so foundational change and impact us super negatively in a time that we really needed that stabilization was just not something that resonated with us.
So we reacted sort of pretty extreme, because the market went from being a source of income to an advertisement for us, overnight. And it took me a couple months to come to terms with that reality. And there are still people that we wanted to bring bread to at the market. There are still other vendors that we were in good relationship with at the market.
And this is our home, so
it happens to be a block away from this location. So
we just had to find a way to make it work. You don't always agree with your family, right? But you find to still love each other.
So mostly I apologize to the organizers, because at the end of the day, it was their decision to make. And, it just, because it didn't necessarily play favorably for us doesn't mean they shouldn't have made the decision. They were looking at it from other points of view, and they're valid. And so, we're back, we're enjoying our time there, and, it's not quite what it once was for us, but then again, we're gaining traction every week, and we believe in our product. It's just, it just actually reinforced the fact that we'll allow our bread to speak for itself, and allow the people coming to the market to decide for themselves what they like.
Yeah, and long term, we typically find that having a variety of things in a single category brings way more shoppers. Not necessarily the first day you do it, but as as a method of growing the traffic at a market. People like to have choice, and the folks that love what you do will still go straight to you.
And that's definitely what we've observed too. Our most successful markets are not the markets that are just exclusive to one person per category or two. Although sometimes there's a beautiful balance that can be had when the market management is extremely active in studying the numbers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's very tricky. We consider that the genius of creating a great market versus an okay market is really understanding those balances when you're curating.
Yeah, it's probably like the
Well,
most
like,
important part about being a vendor too. Yeah.
Flagstaff, I got to hand it to Art. This is our first season there, but he and his team have a sort of magic understanding, it seems, because all the vendors feel like they do extraordinarily well, yet, it's not exclusive to one vendor per category, yet there's some sort of calculus we waited 3 years to be accepted into that market because he had a certain amount of bakers that he allowed in. And it's very appreciated because we go up there and we drive 3 hours to be there. It's the only one that we do that for. And we know, that there's just an exceptional community there waiting to receive bread from us. So when it's done really well, then it serves, I think, all parties. But in the absence of that, choice definitely is better than no choice. The markets that are full of people tend to perform better than the markets that are small.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing the nitty gritty about the Mesa Farmers Market, because this is something that at our markets and also when we're talking to other market managers that, we struggle with. You want to provide your shoppers with a choice. You also want to make sure that your market is full and well curated, but then also the relationship between the market manager and the vendor is a unique thing where it's like, you want your vendors to make money, but also the market has to generate money to continue to go. So you're always kind of like back and forth and balancing. So like kudos to you for taking your moment, stepping away, reconsidering things. And I think that hopefully your market manager appreciates that back and forth and appreciates now that you're like, hey, let's give this another shot. And that also that takes a lot for a business owner. As a vendor, I've walked away from markets and just being like, screw this market, I hate this market, and this market manager doesn't know what they're talking about. But that takes a big person to say, we are being brats and we needed to pout for a little bit, but now we're back and we're gonna give it our all. So
yeah. Try to make it work. If it works to come back, then trying to make that effort.
Yeah.
And like you said, you're not always going to agree with your family, and I do feel like market managers and vendors and farmers, we are like a family, it's like your aunts and your uncles and your cousins. And it's like you're not always going to agree on everything, but it's, have your moments, and then it's good to just kind of bring that discussion back to the table. And so,
yeah,
sounds like it worked out. Yeah.
So one more question that we always ask people that open brick and mortars or kind of expand their businesses into storefronts is, what's your long-term vision for farmers markets? Do you plan to continue to sell in farmers markets, or how do farmers markets, what role do you envision them playing in the long-term plan of your business?
For us, farmers markets have been a cornerstone for everything that Proof has been since its very beginning. We discovered Proof at a market, and I think that the overall, the one line to sum it up in is that without such a place, what we do is sort of alienated in a much larger world of all kinds of values, all kinds of different, businesses and different purposes. I think the farmers market is our closest form of community. And so we find it to be foundational, and we intend to continue going. We have basically built, right now we could be open to the public next door, generating a return from people walking in the door, but we're choosing not to open for quite some time still, probably till October, because first we want to get the farmers markets and baking for the farmers markets dialed from here. We want to try to improve our participation. So, now we have a new bakery with a little bit more capacity. And so we pushed back all of our bakes on Friday night so that the bread is significantly more fresh, when it's coming out of the oven. But we shortened the timetable. So we're basically using this new step as an opportunity to improve our relationship with the farmers markets in general, and then continue to reach out to new people as a result. Our bakery has its place, and it's a core hub for everybody that sort of buys bread from us and, becomes a part of our kind of bakery community. But the farmers market is often where that intersection is going to happen. I think that people will come out to downtown Mesa to visit us without a doubt, but I think that more people will discover Proof Bread and participate in Proof Bread Weekly out at all the markets that we attend going forward.
And you do 5 markets, 4 of which are on Saturday, right?
We actually do 5 on Saturday during the winter season, plus our own store. And during the summer season, we do 4 on Saturday and 1 on Sunday.
And then you go to Flagstaff on Sunday, right? So you've got to have a reasonable amount of market employees. And, the talk of the day and the topic that's on everybody's, tip of everybody's tongue right now is hiring challenges. So how are you keeping up with people to man all of those market booths? And are you experiencing those same challenges as so many people are?
We've had hiring challenges, but not necessarily at the markets. I think it's partially because we tried to build in some safety for ourselves a long time ago, prior to the pandemic. We started to make a policy of having a minimum of 2 employees outside of ourselves at each farmers market to manage, and then also a list of substitutes that were interested in coming when somebody was out. And we had one person on our staff that oversaw. So the moment that I started doing bakery construction, I delegated farmers market management so that we would keep building on that list, keep interviewing people, giving people trials, at markets. So it's a constantly going hiring model where we're constantly having to be on our toes to make sure that there's a redundancy there. So the moment you lose the redundancy, then you lose any kind of safety. For us, our whole business relies on being at those 5 farmers markets on the weekends.
We're also, fortunate in that bread is a staple. And so when you put that out there, that free bread is a perk, motivating. Yeah.
We'll work for bread.
Yeah. I would work for bread.
For sure.
We hire from our community. So we often will put like a need for more help out on our Instagram, because the people who are applying already know who we are and are sort of a part of the story in some way. So people are just choosing to work for Proof because they love Proof. It's not the same as just like putting out a job and then competing in the general job market, which is really difficult right now.
Yeah, so they're working for you because they're passionate about
makes
you.
sense.
Yeah, it's not just like a food service job. It's they
So
admire.
that's a cool
Proof.
brand.
Yeah,
Right.
I know Jon and Amanda. They
Yeah.
seem like awesome people. I want to be a part of what's
Those
going on.
employees are probably
Yeah.
much more likely to stick around and kind of feel invested in your business too. So
I think social can be such a good place for finding employees because of that. But that only works if you've got a good social following. So that kind of leads to
so you
something
guys
else I wanted
have
to talk to you about.
you have an incredibly successful and great social media presence. You guys are really vulnerable on social media and YouTube. And it's been really wonderful, I know, for us to watch and learn about your behind the scenes of your business. And I know customers are always really positively reactive to, from what we've seen, farmers market businesses that do that. Who manages your social media accounts?
It's mostly Jon.
I've taken breaks at times, and Amanda has definitely, held up the social media at times. We've had a couple crew members like participate more heavily than others. But yeah, I've probably carried that torch a lot of the time.
Yeah, you may or may not have noticed, but he's the talker.
Hey, every team's
Yeah.
got to have one, right? And that's really time consuming. I think when people think about, oh, I'm going to have this great business and I have a lot of content to offer, it'll be great. My, followers will love it. I'll just be posting constantly. But it's like, oh yes, I also have to bake bread and like make this bakery work and everything. So it's, how do you guys balance the time? I guess, Jon, if you're doing most of the management, how do you balance kind of doing the social media marketing and then also operating your business and being at the markets and things?
So I'm going to jump in and just say that we get a lot of messages, and those aren't necessarily always managed by us. We try to take on as much as we can, but at some point that became too much. And so we have the same person who's managing our farmers markets employees is the same one who's also doing community
good.
discussion.
Oh, that's smart.
That's a
Somebody
great
who
idea.
could answer like, "Hey, where can I find you this week?" That gets a little
Yeah.
monotonous
Yeah.
for a business owner to be like, "I'm at this market,"
Yeah.
Yeah, and once
Just the
we
easy.
launched YouTube, we started getting like random phone calls of people telling John to cut his hair, and like it just started to get a little weird.
Whoa.
Unsolicited comments. We feel you.
Yeah. So for us, it was just really important, like to keep the voice of proof. And so, and it's also nice because it provides a point of reflection for us on what we are doing on the day to day when things get hard or when things are going well. It's kind of just a nice place to place gratitude or thank our community or tell everybody, hey, we're having a hard time.
I think part of it is we are posting very much in the moment. It's not scripted in advance. So if you're getting a post, like you're reading it as I'm thinking it, if I'm writing it. And likely, same with Amanda, like on her writing.
He just takes a lot less time than I do.
But then her posts are really probably the best ones. She'll take like an hour or two and write something just absolutely beautiful. Sometimes when I'll write, it's in the moment, and sometimes that comes out really nicely, and other times it's a little rougher around the edges. But I think that's part of how we can get it done. And in that way, it's a time interrupter more than a time consumer, because you sort of have to choose that moment and say, okay, well, I have a lot of feelings about this right now, and I have a lot to say about this. So I'm going to pause and write this because it's probably best for this other thing that I want to do, like whether that be encourage people to buy a special or tell people about where we're going to be this weekend or share this particular problem that we're having. So I think social media, we've sort of honed how to have a dialogue with the people who are reading.
Would you say that vulnerability came natural?
The vulnerability, I don't think came natural. I think the vulnerability came from watching her be vulnerable with me. It's sort of the rawness of our discussions behind the scenes, especially in the beginning of Proof, where we were, in a intense battle of what it is that our life is. Like, what is life?
It can be a little therapeutic and
I was
like
just gonna
cathartic.
say,
Just get
yeah.
that feedback from people who love your business. That can translate to like a personal love. It just does
Yeah.
kind of, they feel invested in you as people because you're out there talking about things from a personal point of view. And then, I just feel like it's kind of reciprocal. Like they're sharing this with you. And so you feel that sharing things with them will be received well. And it's kind of a way to flush out feelings and let people know what's going on. And just seeing the great comments you guys get on your posts, it seems like you have built a really strong community. And for all the things that social media does that are terrible, I think the things that it does that are wonderful is it builds these communities, and you can feel supported, especially when you're a farmer's market vendor or chef or baker or someone who's in a hot kitchen a lot or feeling kind of stressed or working with code compliance issues. Getting that kind of feedback and being real about what's going on is,
I think
probably helpful.
That's been kind of like from the very get-go something that Jared started, but that we wanted to keep going, is that Proof is human. There are humans behind this bread that make the bread. And I think that in today's society, we have separated a lot of the human element, like robots are calling us, and then once we get to a real person, we're treating that person like a robot. You know what I'm saying? So we want to keep that like human element alive and well and at the forefront of our brand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's smart. And on Instagram, it is so easy to kind of just like have this like Instagram filter of like everything is perfect, everything is awesome, and then like owning a small business, not every day is awesome.
Yeah.
And I think it's like there is a refreshingness to kind of see that, and obviously you don't want like your whole feed to be a Debbie Downer type of thing. There's also enough of that on the internet, but you guys just have
Nice
such
balance.
like a natural flow. It does. It's very obvious that you're real people doing something real and trying really hard every day, and that people love that. Farmers market shoppers love that.
I mean, that's the difference with farmers markets. You're face to face. And I think your characterization, Amanda, of proof is human, that applies to farmers markets in general. It's the high touch versus the high tech, and celebrating our humanity and the fact that these are real people behind the tents and in front of the tents and in our community.
Yeah.
What's interesting to add is that the core following of Proof is a farmers market community following. Sure, now like it's grown, but prior to our YouTube channel, it had grown to about 8,000 or so followers, mostly at that point derived from farmers market attendance and community and network. And so I think the other thing that's interesting about social media is that it's this ability to connect with people that you have a lot of shared values with throughout the week. You see your farmers market customers for 30 seconds or so on a Saturday morning, maybe a minute, and you have a real connection because I can't wait to see the same faces over and over again and learning people's habits. I'll never forget the guy in the downtown Phoenix market that, he's walking up and I know he's going to want a fruit and nut loaf and a olive loaf directly into his bag. He doesn't really want to talk about anything else. He just, wants his bread, wants to smile and the fact that like I can basically grab that fruit and nut loaf before he's even arrived at the table and set it in his bag, that's somehow pleasurable for me and for him all the same. So to be able to sort of follow one another throughout the week in some way, shape, or form through social media is nice.
It's kind of it's comforting. It's kind of like when you have a hairdresser,
It's that
Like
Cheers
that.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Everybody,
like a diner
everybody
thing.
knows your name or at least what you eat.
Yeah. Everyone knows your order.
Yeah, he is fruit and nut loaf.
Yes. That's so like endearing. I feel like that's such a special
Yeah.
part of being at a farmer's market and in a restaurant, just having that special thing. I know my parents had a restaurant growing up and it was like, there's like whole wheat bialy girl with cream cheese on the side. And it's like, we didn't talk, but I just knew her and she knew me and, we knew her order. And it's just like, nothing can replace that kind of connection and kind of knowing each other in a certain way. You know what they like to eat. That's such a special thing
It's
to know
intimate,
about
yeah.
somebody. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the idea of departing that feels like severance. It feels like chopping off the arms and legs of Proof, really, to move away from farmers markets. So we don't see that really in our future. I think we're more keen to continue to observe the culture that brought us to this point and to not change our identity to become kind of the bakery at the farmer's market that probably shouldn't be at the farmer's market anymore because it's lost its kind of human element. Because I think that can happen anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a shame when it happens at the farmer's market.
Yeah.
And it does, yeah. But what an awareness to have. It sounds like you guys are just staying really aware of that and being conscious of that.
Wow.
Well-
We could be picking your brain all day.
We could ask you 1,000 more questions, but I think we better try to keep our episodes at least close to what we usually do time-wise. We're really excited to get to talk to you guys. We love your story, and we're glad that you took time to speak with us.
Awesome.
All right.
Great.
It's been great talking to you.
Sure.
Thank
Nice
you
to
so
talk to
much, guys.
Much.
All right, we'll keep in
Thanks.
touch. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
You guys.
Bye.
Thanks for listening today, and big thanks to the Food Corridor for making things smooth and easy for rental kitchen managers and food entrepreneurs throughout the U.S., and for supporting Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast.
What a great episode. Big thanks to today's sponsor, the Food Corridor. Thanks for listening to Tent Talk today. Please leave us a review on your podcast app or wherever you listen to Tent Talk. Let us and others know how you're enjoying the podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode of Tent Talk. Connect with fellow farmers market folks in our private Facebook group the Farmers Market Pros community. Follow us on Instagram at Farmers Market Pros and find online education and other resources on our website at farmersmarketpros.com. Tent Talk is brought to you by Farmers Market Pros, where passion meets profit. This episode of Tent Talk was originally produced by Justine Marzoni Mead, with original music by David Mead. Our new podcast producer, Haley Pascalades, made this best of episode possible. Thank you so much for listening today, and tune in next week for another great episode.